What if everything you believed about the world, the way you see yourself, your purpose, your very reason for being, was wrong? What if the answer to life's greatest question had been hidden in plain sight for centuries, waiting for you to notice? What if the key to understanding the meaning of life wasn't found in the latest self-help book or the newest scientific theory, but in the tortured soul of a 19th century Russian genius? Enter Fyodor Dostoevsky, a man who looked into the darkest corners of human existence, whose works are filled with intellectual battles, emotional depth, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels meaningless. Dostoevsky didn't write novels, he wrote an exploration of the human soul. His characters wrestle with everything we face today: identity, freedom, morality, and our place in the universe, and through their struggles he uncovers profound truths about us all. In this video, we're diving deep into the mind of Dostoevsky, the genius who truly understood the meaning of our lives, from his personal struggles with faith and doubt to his characters' desperate search for purpose. We'll explore how his works not only define existential thought, but also offer answers to some of our most pressing questions about life itself. Strap in, this journey through his world is about to get intense. Chapter 1. Who was Fyodor Dostoevsky? To truly understand Dostoevsky's genius, we first need to know who the man behind the pen was. Fyodor Dostoevsky was born in Moscow in 1821, a country on the brink of radical change. Russia at the time was a land where tradition clashed violently with modernization, where deep religious faith faced the growing pressures of secular intellectual movements. This was a world of emperors, serfs, and revolutions, and Dostoevsky would live through much of it. He came from a troubled background. His father was murdered by his own serfs when Dostoevsky was only 18, leaving him with a profound sense of abandonment and a lasting distrust in the authority of the powerful. His own early years were filled with hardship, loss, and emotional turmoil, but perhaps it was this very instability that gave him the ability to capture the full range of human experience in his works, especially the tension between despair and hope. At 28, Dostoevsky was arrested for being part of a radical group that sought to reform the oppressive Tsarist government. His punishment? A near execution. Imagine the shock: a firing squad lined up, ready to take his life. Yet just before the execution, a messenger arrived with a reprieve. His sentence was commuted to 4 years in a Siberian labor camp. It was here in the brutal conditions of the Siberian prison that Dostoevsky's soul was tested and shaped forever. This experience not only gave him first-hand insight into human suffering, but also led him to question fundamental beliefs about life, death, and the meaning of our existence. It was here that Dostoevsky started his journey into exploring the deepest, darkest corners of the human soul. His years in exile would be marked by profound existential reflections, shaping the themes that would dominate his later works. Chapter 2. The Crisis of Meaning. Dostoevsky lived at a time of intellectual and philosophical crisis. The Enlightenment, with its promises of reason, progress, and scientific understanding, had already begun to shape the worldview of much of Europe. But as the 19th century unfolded, more and more people began to feel the emptiness of these promises. The mechanization of life, the rise of rationalism, and the rejection of faith in many parts of society left a profound void in the hearts of the masses. In the wake of traditional beliefs, humanity was adrift. This was a world where faith was waning, and Dostoevsky saw it all too clearly. His novels explore this loss of meaning and the existential dread that comes with it. In his 1864 novella, Notes from Underground, he creates an unreliable, bitter narrator who reflects on the state of modern society, its contradictions, its dehumanizing aspects, and the self-imposed alienation that results from a rejection of meaning. The narrator's central claim is that rational thought and Enlightenment ideals, while valuable, could never provide the solace or purpose humanity needs to thrive. The underground man in Notes isn't just a character. He's the embodiment of the disillusionment that many felt in an age where religion and tradition were losing their hold on society. He spends the entire novella struggling to find a reason for his existence. This intellectual loneliness, this deep sense of alienation, wasn't merely the plight of one man. It was a crisis of a generation. And Dostoevsky was not just an observer, but a participant, engaging with the intellectual currents of his time in ways that continue to resonate today. Through his characters, Dostoevsky asked, what happens when we reject all established systems of meaning, faith, family, community, and tradition? How do we live when we see the world as a cold and indifferent? And perhaps more importantly, how do we find a sense of direction in the absence of any clear answer? Chapter 3: The Idea of Freedom and the Grand Inquisitor. One of the most profound questions Dostoevsky explored is the nature of freedom, a theme that remains central to his legacy. In the Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky uses the figure of the Grand Inquisitor to explore what freedom means in a modern world. In this striking parable, Ivan Karamazov tells a story in which Christ returns to Earth during the Spanish Inquisition, but instead of being revered, Christ is imprisoned by the Grand Inquisitor, who accuses him of condemning humanity to the unbearable burden of freedom. The Inquisitor argues that people crave security above all else, and that, by offering humanity the gift of freedom, Christ has doomed them to suffer. The Inquisitor believes that people are not capable of bearing the responsibility of freedom, and thus, they must be governed by authority. By giving people the gift of freedom, the Inquisitor argues, Christ has doomed them to choose wrongly and suffer eternally. In a sense, the Grand Inquisitor represents the darker side of Dostoevsky's intellectual battle, the temptation to surrender freedom for comfort. The Inquisitor is trying to save humanity from itself, thinking that people would be better off living in servitude to a higher power that offers certainty and direction. The question Dostoevsky raises is, can true freedom exist without chaos? Is it even possible to live freely without succumbing to despair, confusion, or moral decay? Dostoevsky, through his powerful dialogue, presents us with a timeless dilemma. Are we better off with the painful responsibility of freedom, or would we prefer to be freed from this burden, living under the watchful eye of a higher authority? Chapter 4: Suffering and Redemption. While freedom is a key theme in Dostoevsky's works, suffering is the force that truly drives his characters to change. For Dostoevsky, suffering is not merely a consequence of living in an imperfect world. It is the means through which we find meaning. This idea is nowhere more evident than in Crime and Punishment, where we follow the protagonist, Rodion Raskolnikov, a brilliant but deeply troubled young man who commits a murder, believing he is justified in doing so for a greater good. Raskolnikov's intellectual arrogance leads him to believe that he is above the law and morality, but the guilt and spiritual decay he experiences after the crime torment him. Throughout the novel, Dostoevsky asks, what happens when a person steps outside of moral boundaries? Can they be redeemed, or are they forever doomed? Raskolnikov's internal battle becomes a powerful metaphor for the human condition, one that captures the weight of guilt, the desire for redemption, and the terrifying cost of facing our own sins. But it's not just Raskolnikov who faces suffering. Many of Dostoevsky's characters grapple with the idea that true redemption can only be achieved through suffering. And the idiot, Prince Mishkin, a Christ-like figure, comes face to face with the evil and cruelty of the world. His innocence and goodness become a form of suffering that he cannot escape, and yet, in his suffering, he achieves a kind of purity that stands in stark contrast to the cynicism around him. Dostoevsky often portrayed suffering as a means of cleansing, purifying the soul, and preparing it for something greater. Chapter 5: Faith and the Search for Meaning. Perhaps the most important question Dostoevsky explored is the nature of faith, not just as a religious concept, but as a profound existential need in a world that feels devoid of meaning. Dostoevsky's works are saturated with the tension between faith and doubt. His characters often wrestle with the existence of God, the problem of evil, and the very meaning of suffering. And yet, amid all this turmoil, there's always a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption. In the Brothers Karamazov, Alyosha Karamazov represents a kind of living faith, a simple, selfless belief in the goodness of humanity and the power of love. Yet Alyosha's faith is not without its own challenges. He must learn to navigate the pain and tragedy of the world, and at times it seems as if his faith may be too fragile to withstand the horrors around him. But for Dostoevsky, Alyosha's unwavering love and belief in the possibility of redemption through grace are what make him truly heroic. This is the paradox of Dostoevsky's writing. His characters are constantly struggling with doubt, despair, and a sense of meaninglessness. But it is through their suffering and their faith that they begin to understand the deeper truths about life. Dostoevsky believed that faith, despite doubt, was the only path toward a meaningful existence. It is not a blind submission to dogma, but a living, breathing engagement with the world, one that accepts suffering and evil while still hoping for something more. Chapter 6: Legacy and Impact. Dostoevsky's work continues to resonate today because he wasn't merely writing about a world long past. He was writing about our world. His exploration of existential themes, freedom, suffering, morality, and the search for meaning, remains just as relevant in our own time as it was in 19th century Russia. In the 20th and 21st centuries, his influence can be seen across a broad spectrum of fields, from psychology to philosophy to literature. Figures like Friedrich Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Carl Jung found inspiration in Dostoevsky's writings. He challenged them to confront their own beliefs about morality, freedom, and the nature of the human psyche. And his impact isn't just academic. Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, The Idiot, and his other works have been adapted countless times for film, theater, and even opera. His stories still captivate audiences, drawing us into the depths of the human soul, making us question our own beliefs, actions, and the very nature of existence itself. Fyodor Dostoevsky's genius lies not in offering easy answers, but in forcing us to ask the right questions. In a world filled with uncertainty, he challenges us to wrestle with the deepest parts of our humanity, to find meaning amidst suffering, and to embrace the complexities of freedom and faith. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Dostoevsky's world. If his works have inspired you as much as they have inspired so many others, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with those who may be searching for meaning in their own lives. As Dostoevsky himself said, "Man is what he believes." Let's continue to search for meaning together.